Hi, my name is Kristine Lisac, and I was born in 1993, and I grew up in Portland. Bye, Max! Growing up, I always wanted to be a mom. I remember I would carry around my dolls everywhere, and I would like check them into the church nursery because I thought that they were real. And it's always been like something I worked with. I worked in daycares, I was a nanny, I always was involved around kids. So I actually grew up in this house right here. My parents decided to move, and so we built this house, and I've lived in this community, in this area my whole life. And I feel really thankful for how I grew up and who I grew up around, and just always being surrounded by family and by friends in our community and schools, and I think that it really always made us feel supported growing up. I went to a charter school, and while I was there I was taking college classes, so I had taken some psychology classes, and they had touched a little bit on foster care. And so when I moved out, I told my parents, I was like, you guys have this huge house and 4 extra bedrooms and all this love, like you guys should foster. Not knowing anything about it, just kind of telling them that it would be fun. My mom was like, absolutely not. I just got 4 kids out of the house. Like, why would I take on more? And so I went to college and went to Oregon State, got my degree in psychology. And the day after I graduated, I flew out to Guatemala with a missions trip because I wasn't really sure what to do after graduation. We had one night where we were staying in an orphanage, and we were doing worship at night, and there was this huge lightning storm outside, and we were all sitting around singing, and it was like this beautiful moment of so much chaos outside the building and so much peace inside. And I remember sitting there, and for the first time I think in my life I got this like really clear image that I know was from God. It was this little girl up on a hill. She was like a year and a half old, and she was standing at the top of the hill, and I remember walking up to her. In this imagery, there was her standing there and me walking up, and I remember thinking like there was so much joy to see her, but I didn't know who she was, and there wasn't a clear face of who she was. It was just this little girl in a white dress, and it kind of stayed in my head for a really long time, and throughout the songs we were singing and throughout like our worship. So I started like praying to God and asking for like more pictures of this, and that was all he gave me. But it was just this sign of like, you don't know this girl, but there's so much joy in her, and it kind of felt like she was somehow mine or somehow belonged to me. And so that picture stayed in my head, but then we continued on, and as we were there, we worked with a bunch of different people, and I remember holding babies and hearing their stories from the workers there, just kids who had been abandoned or abused or left. There were little ones who had been like found in dumpsters on the side of the road, and I remember holding these beautiful babies and being like this heart-wrenching like love towards them of like, oh my gosh, you're so perfect, and here you are in my arms, and you want the best for these babies, but you realize like, you know, they're in this orphanage and they're having so much love from the workers there, but their life is so much different than anything I've ever been through. And I remember just like feeling so much love towards them, and God just like coming in and breaking my heart for them and being like, there needs to be something that can change about this. In Guatemala, I kept thinking that this is stuff that happens outside of our country, and this is stuff that happens in third world countries or in these places of poverty, and not how could they ever happen in our community? We've never been exposed to them. So I started working for a residential care facility. Through working there, I realized that no, this kind of stuff happens in our own community as well, and right here in Oregon, right here in our neighborhoods. And we were working with kids who had been sold in sex trafficking and had been rescued. We were working with kids who had been severely neglected or abused or raped or were homeless or involved in drugs or completely destroyed by their family. The Lord just used that of like, hey, this is not only happening in other countries, but this is happening right here, and that you can play a role in it right now. It was so powerful to be able to talk to kids and be with them and join them in their pain and suffering and just like pray over them and to encourage them in any way possible that like, hey, this world is a good place and you've been treated so poorly, but like there's so much good in the world, and trying to show them that. So after a year of working there, I decided to work for an adoption agency. It was an international adoption agency, and it really changed my heart in a lot of ways because I realized what my passions were. I was working for an international adoption agency, and there's so much good that comes from it and so much of God's work being done there, but I realized my passion was more for domestic adoption and for caring for our children right here. And so after a short time, I quit and thought that maybe God would use me more hands-on in our community. I started listening to a series on identity that spoke about adoption and God's heart behind it. And it talked about how in Ephesians, the Greeks really valued perfection and beauty. And when they would have a baby, it would be taken to the father. And if the father denied the baby, they would take the child up on top of a hill and leave it there. And there were hundreds of babies left on this hill in Ephesus, and people would come in and they would either take babies and raise them as prostitutes or slaves, or they would come in and take babies and save them and raise them as their own adopted child. Hearing this, just like, I broke down into tears because it immediately brought back up that image of when I was in Guatemala and the picture that God had provided me with of the little girl on top of the hill. God just spoke to me and was like, this is what I was talking about. And this little girl who I showed you years ago is a promise that I have for you, and a girl who you will eventually meet, and she's somehow mine. And God's still piecing that together, but I do know that this girl will somehow be adopted into God's family and into my family. It's just been really powerful, and even though it hasn't been fulfilled yet, just knowing that God has this promise for my life. Yeah, so when my parents started fostering, we were super excited, but also didn't know what to expect. So for Christmas, they had just finished up their classes and hadn't been placed with anyone yet. So we wrote them a card. Dear Mom and Dad, this gift is not only for you, but also for our future foster siblings we are so anxious to meet. We wanted to get something that in a small way shows how deeply we support you guys in the decision to follow God's call to care for His children. We cannot thank you enough for the amazing life, love, and support you have given each of us over the years. We are so thankful for the family you have created and are delighted to share our parents with others in hopes they can experience as much love as we have. We know that whatever time they stay with us, they will be adopted into our family as if God has adopted us into His. The Bible is a long story of sacrifice and redemption, and as Christians, it's our job to love others, especially those in distress. We are so proud to see you proclaim that exact story within your life, and as you set an example of obedience in that command, not only showing God's unconditional love to His children, but also showing grace, love, and restoration to their parents, who He loves just as much. We're thankful for you guys and excited for this next chapter in your life, even though parts may be hard. Thank you for putting your heart on the line to bring glory to His name. Love, William, Julie, Robert, Andrew, and Kristine. So we got our first placement a little bit over a year ago, and it's this crazy feeling when you get a call because you're kind of excited to have this new little one join you, but you also, your heart breaks for the parents because you know that as you're gaining something, the parents are losing something. We picked our first one up straight from the hospital, and we had her for a couple weeks, and the goal is always to reunite back with birth parents. It was so powerful when this mom was able to reunite back with her beautiful daughter, because I remember sitting in the DHS office and my mom and I went together, and as we're handing baby back to her mom, it was this beautiful moment, and we asked if we could just pray over her and pray over both of their lives. And I remember sitting in the DHS office with our arms reached out for this mom and daughter, and not knowing them, but having such a connection to them because we've had their baby in our house for a long time. Just everyone like being in tears, but also so hopeful for what God has and how this mom genuinely just needed a little extra support, and then she was able to have her baby and to raise her and to continue to love her, and just like being able to show Jesus throughout that moment was really powerful. We got another call, and my parents had only ever been signed up to foster one child, and we got a call that said, hey, we have siblings, can you take them for a couple weeks? My mom goes, yeah, we can have them for a couple weeks, like that's totally fine. And a couple weeks turned into a couple months, and they've now been in our house for a year, and it's been probably the hardest year we've ever been through, but also the closest I've ever been with God, because I'm in a consistent routine of praying and praying over these little ones, and praying not just for their well-being, but also that God would use their lives in big ways, and that He knows what He's doing with their lives, even though there's so much chaos and confusion here on earth, like God has a better plan for it. So yeah, we just continue to pray over them, and they're with us now, and we love them, and they've brought so much joy into our lives and taught us so much about unconditional love. Yeah. So right now in Oregon, there's about 1,100 children in the foster care system, and in Multnomah County alone, there's about 1,500. One of DHS's biggest challenges is that there's only 750 registered fostered families, and so it leaves about 800 kids misplaced. So they're placed in residential treatment facilities, they're placed in group homes, they're placed in sheltered care, they're placed in the hospital, or they end up having to spend the night with caseworkers in hotel rooms because there's honestly nowhere else to put them. So one thing that God's laid on my heart is just to help people know what's going on, because I've learned that not a lot of people know what foster care is, and that I didn't know about it until we dove straight into it. So in any way that people want to help, if it's donating clothes or donating toys or their time to do respite or to give foster families a break, is so important. And we would not be able to do it today without families who have generously given to us clothes and who continuously send us items, and just how powerful that can be to us. And we've definitely learned that DHS is only as strong as the community that surrounds it. So if the community is failing, then DHS has no way to thrive. My heart is that the churches and DHS can have such a strong and powerful relationship that the first place when a child comes into care, the first place that DHS calls is the church and says, where are your families? Where can we send this child? And that we'd have a list of families ready to say yes and to open up their homes and to show Jesus' love to them. And so that's my heart behind all this, and I just want to continue walking in God's path and His call for the visions He's given me, and for right now just being a part of fostering. And I currently have just signed up to take the classes to become a foster parent of my own, and so that'll be interesting when that starts, but to not only provide respite, but to also sign up and do it. There's so many ways to get involved, and if you feel led, there's going to be a link of a bunch of different organizations in the description below, and feel free to click on them and find out all the good work that they're doing right here in our community and ways to get involved and help.